What's up, interweb? RhyQuinn here, and welcome back to the GBA D-League Season 2 weekly recaps. We are in week number 3, and as always, I am joined by the one and only Shroomraver.
Hello everyone, Shroomraver here. Yep, as Rhy said, welcome to the game breakdown from week 3 of the D-League, and we have got some fantastic games to go over, some big rivalries we're looking to be settled interdivisionally. So without any further ado, we're going to get into the first of those games, which saw S2W3 and the San Francisco Arcaniners taking on Super Gassy and the New York Shellmets. Now, these guys were both sitting at 2 wins and 0 losses, so this was always going to be a huge game. And we did see S2W3's Arcaniners come out on top with a big 3-0 win. Now, this game took place on Showdown because there were some little, I say little, Wi-Fi problems. They were actually fairly sizable. The game was restarted many times, a lot of disconnections, then they moved to Showdown and recreated it as many times as they could to try and get the game as accurate as possible. Gassy's team had quite a few sacrificial moves, which I thought was interesting given how this is kind of differential based when it gets down to it. You saw Healing Wish on Blissey and Memento on Latios. I actually thought it was quite funny that at one point he did Healing Wish into the Memento user, which was quite nice. He also had a very well built Amoongus, I thought, stopped a lot of George's big threats, mainly in the form of that Unburdened Hitmonlee that Gassy was looking to prepare quite a lot for. Could also take a hit from Shaman, which is always nice to have. You know, on George's side, he just had a very good game. He had a very good first turn, a very nice matchup with Zapdos versus Tornadus, getting massive damage straight off the bat onto the Tornadus, which is one of the main things that he would have had for Uxie. And also, another thing I really liked about what George did was his use of Skuntank. Skuntank can be highly underrated, it's an interesting option for defog, and, you know, George used it incredibly well. Able to take on Latios and Amoongus incredibly well. He actually took out Latios with Skuntank, using those kind of mind games to go for crunch on the defog, and then able to subsequently cause enormous damage to Tornadus, having kept back the fact that he did have Sucker Punch on there. He also managed to get huge damage on the Latios earlier, which forced the Healing Wish from Blissey. Blissey is obviously a massive wall, and would have been a massive pain and a big player for Super Gassy, but he kind of forced the Healing Wish from Blissey, which meant it was out of the way without him having to do too much work to it. It almost went wrong, we have to say, for the Arcaniners. There was a bit of a misgen. He was wanting to bring fully physical Scarfed Lando Eye, but in fact it was gens to have Earth Power. Now, George being George was able to turn this to his advantage, even when genning goes wrong, he's able to get it right. Able to bluff being special very well, always forcing out the Amoongus that he didn't really have anything to touch it with, thinking that it would have Psychic on there. And when it came down to the end game, he was able to save Hitmonlee for the late game incredibly well. It can be tempting to just go for the fake out Unburden with Hitmonlee. You see players on like Showdown casually using it quite a lot like that, and going for that Unburden fake out when really it should be saved. George was able to save it until the very end, and therefore get the most out of his Hitmonlee. So, you know, whilst Gassy was able to build a really nice team with a lot of stops to some premier threats on George's side, the Arcaniners were able eventually to come out on top.
Yeah, I think you pretty much said basically everything about this game, but I've got to say props to both coaches for taking the time and the effort to recreate properly the match on Showdown, despite them getting to basically the end of the match on Wi-Fi before it disconnected, the Hitmonlee going for fake out, getting the Unburden, which signaling, you know, the last few turns of the game, and then they disconnected. Still managing to recreate that on Showdown and having the time and the effort to recreate that. Props to both coaches for doing that, and not just saying, screw it, we'll have a forfeit or whatever. So it was really great of them to actually recreate on Showdown. But like you said, I think it just shows the battling ability of George to be able to turn the misgen, which could have thrown a lot of people off and thought that, you know, their Landorus is now useless or whatever. He turns that to his advantage, figures he can use it as a bluff, and uses it to perfection to force out Amoongus every single time. But as you said, the Healing Wish Blissey going into the Memento Latios was pretty hilarious. But the bluff that I just mentioned about the Landorus managing to actually get a U-turn off against the Latios as Subagasi expected the Psychic on his Amoonguss, switched into Latios as the Landorus went for a U-turn. Obviously, it's a physical Landorus, so did a huge amount of damage, which, as you said, forced that Healing Wish to go onto the Latios. Almost, not necessarily wasting the Healing Wish per se, but it forced it to go onto the Latios as opposed to any other Mon. And as he said, a very nice prediction on his Skuntank's behalf. He had 3 options with his Skuntank against the Latios. He had Crunch, Sucker Punch, and Pursuit, opting to go for the right choice, which was Crunch, predicting the defog, went for the Crunch and managed to take out the Latios, which was very, very well played indeed. But as I think you basically covered anything I say at this point will basically just be echoing what you've said. So the Arcaniners pick up a 3-0 victory, still undefeated. The Shellmets take their first loss, and with that said, we shall move on to the second game from this week, and that is the Buffalo Bills and McCarty taking on the Miami Dolphinians and HardTac. Now, this game was very interesting. So the score actually ended up being 5-3 to the Buffalo Bills. Now, the way that happened is because the timer ran out. The timer hit its hour-long limit, and at the end of that hour, it was 5-3 to the Buffalo Bills, so they claimed the victory. So the way this happened then, we'll take it from the start. In terms of a team-building perspective, for the Buffalo Bills, the Excadrill that McCarty prepped put a lot of pressure on Hardy's team. He had it scarfed, so it outsped all non-scarfers, and it can 2-hit KO or OHKO almost everything on the Dolphinians team, which was a great asset to have. Could use that very well indeed. Not to mention the fact that he brought a soundproof Exploud to switch into Hyper Voice from Sylveon, and that Exploud, which was Choice Specs with Boom Burst, OHKOs or 2-hit KOs everything on the Dolphinian side, which is absolutely ridiculous. When you don't have a switch into a Mon, you're going to really struggle in a game. And in terms of the other side, from a team-building perspective, Hardy bringing Rain Dance on Rotom Wash to counter the predicted Sand that he was going to bring, which was a fair prediction to make, considering that for a while, McCarty even had a Team Gen that included the Sand, but changed his mind about it. So that was a very fair prediction to make, to expect the Sand. And the Rain Dance on Rotom Wash, it kind of made sense because he also had Hydro Pump to be able to take advantage of it. At least he had something to take advantage of the weather this time. But when we actually get into the match, one series of plays that made me laugh quite a lot, I think it was what it should hopefully be in the plays of the week, was he had Trace on Porygon 2 to try and attempt to trace Sandrush from the Excadrill. It's the reason he had Trace. What actually ended up happening was Exploud switched into a Hyper Voice from Sylveon, Soundproof didn't affect it, and then HardTac switches in his Porygon 2, traces the Soundproof as the Exploud goes for Boom Burst, so doesn't hit it. So they're both sitting there with Soundproof, not hitting each other, which was just, it was a great little series of plays. At one point in the match, HardTac's Weavile was looking to set up. It predicted a Protect from the Umbreon, as I believe it had just gone for a Wish. He set up a Swords Dance and was going to go for an Icicle Crash to maybe take out the Umbreon, but he missed the Icicle Crash, which Hardy was pretty adamant that did matter, that would have taken out the Umbreon. Looking at damage calcs, I don't think it would have. I think it maybe would have been close, but then of course it could have been a crit. He could have flinched the Umbreon, so it may have mattered, but then again it may not. We'll have to see about that one, but it was an unfortunate miss off the Icicle Crash, which may, with a bit of luck on his side, may have actually taken out the Umbreon, which would have been a huge problem for him to be able to set it down. But I do feel that play was a little bit reckless, considering that he knew he needed Weavile to be able to even touch the Dusclops. It was basically all he had to even hit the Dusclops. So he needed to keep it, and because of a foul play from Umbreon, he lost it. He'd already taken a U-turn onto Weavile, so it was a very low amount of HP, and the Umbreon just was able to clean it up with a foul play after it missed the Icicle Crash. So, I feel like it was a little bit reckless. That Icicle Crash miss was unfortunate, but at the same time I do feel like it was a little bit of a reckless play, but a little bit of luck for for Hardy in this match, actually. Bearing in mind all the full powers and everything he's got in the past. He then actually get a double Ice Beam freeze in this match, which was very interesting to see. Not that they mattered too much, because they thawed out pretty quickly. But there was a few turns where McCarty couldn't do much because of a double Ice Beam freeze, which was pretty funny. But there was a pretty stally segment in the match where there was just... there was Swagger on the Porygon 2, there was, Wish protecting and recovering on either side. Porygon 2 was recovering and swaggering, and then there was Wish protecting and from Umbreon, and it was just switching, and there wasn't much happening. It was just kept going back and forth, same moves over and over again. But we get to one point in the match where a Hydro Pump crit on Umbreon allowed it to go down the following turn to a Volt Switch from Rotom Wash. So the Umbreon did manage to go down. But then at the end, Hardy kind of knew that as soon as his Weavile went down, he basically had lost the match. He didn't have a way to touch Dusclops. Dusclops could kind of stall him out, especially with Wish passing from Umbreon. He couldn't really do much to it. So all he did at the end, he said that it may not be the most popular decision, but he timer stalled at the end to get a better differential. So instead of being 5-0'd, it ended at 5-3, so he gets a -2 differential instead of -5, which is, I guess, makes sense. I mean, fair play to him. If he doesn't care about what people think about it, then by all means go for it, I guess. But he felt like he had to resort to that to try and not get another 5-0 loss once again. But it was, you do see some improvement from Hardy this week, I think. I think every set that he brought this week, aside from maybe the Nidoking set, I think was actually a very solid set. Even bringing the Rain Dance on Rotom Wash, which I think some people are going to question, I feel like it did kind of make sense because, as someone who's used the Excadrill Hippowdon combo in the past, it is incredibly deadly, and one way to stop that is to get rid of the sand. So I do think it made sense to have Rain Dance. It's just a nice little backup to have. He didn't, have to use it in any way, shape, or form. It's just if the sand was there and the opportunity arises, it's nice to have, I think. So I do think that did make sense a little bit. But in the end, McCarty out-prepped and I guess outplayed Hardy to take the 5-3 victory.
Yeah, absolutely. McCarty's team building once again was very good. This time, we've seen him run some very specific EV spreads. This time we saw a little bit more of a general 252, 252 standard spreads going on. The likes of Excadrill, Umbreon, Mons like that, really running them sort of basically, because that's what he really needed to win. Excadrill is the threat. It's hitting massive attack stats. Adamant Scarf is going to take care of a lot of things. He supports that with the big walling core of Dusclops and Umbreon. And he really loves Screech Exploud. I really want to see him make Screech Exploud work because he's brought it a couple of times and it's a very nice idea. Get the Screech off, get the defenses down. This time he was looking to go for it onto a potential baton passing Sylveon, which Hardy did bring. Along the lines of get the Screeches going, and if you want a baton pass out into something, I'm going to be able to revenge kill whatever you go into, with Excadrill, for example. But Exploud on its own, Specs Exploud just OHKOs all of the things. Everything just drops. He was going through the list of things that it OHKO'd, and he was like, on Hardy's team it OHKOs this. Oh, this one's a 2-hit KO. OHKO, OHKO, OHKO. Maybe a 3-hit KO. OHKO, OHKO, OHKO. So it's just massive offensive pressure. He was initially, as Rai said, building a slightly different team with the ideas of sand and more defense, but realizing that wasn't going to work, he changed up his plans kind of at the 11th hour to go with more offensive pressure. And he was bringing Sleep Talk Inner Focus Crobat just for several opposing lead options. He was saying if Medicham wanted to get greedy and go for the fake out Mega Evolution, he could just bop it with a banded Brave Bird. Sleep Talk in case Hardy wanted to lead off with that Sleep Talking Butterfree, which I'm kind of sad he didn't bring. I do want to see it. I really want to see the Butterfree put in some work at some point in this season. It was unfortunate for McCarty that the one thing Hardy did lead with was the Rotom, which Crobat does not want to be taking on. As was mentioned, some interesting sets on Hardy's side. That Rain on Rotom Wash was very nice. Support Nidoking with hazards. It's a nice idea. because you expect to see the kind of wall-breaking Nidoking sets with just massive attacks all over the place. But rocking Stealth Rocks and Toxic Spikes, nice idea against the Boufflant builds. I'm not sure if Toxic Spikes were the way forward. You've got a Premier Spinner in the form of Excadrill that is immune to Toxic Spikes and takes negligible damage from rocks. Also has that potential defogging Crobat, which can really nicely deal with hazards as well. Very nice place to see that soundproof series of events that Rye's already mentioned. Misses on Icicle Crash, unfortunate, but not game-changing. But yeah, I think we're seeing a definite improvement from Hardy. The timer stalling, as has been said, might not be the most popular option, but I think that another sort of 5-0 loss, which it could have gone towards, would really have set Hardy back so much that it just would have been a hole he would have been unable to climb out of. So I think going for the timer stall, whilst maybe unpopular, it's to save the differential, that's what matters, and it just might sort of put him in a slightly better mindset than having, maybe another 5-0. And the last thing I really want to say about that game, the video from the Dolphinian side, just such a beautiful song. Hardy decided to entertain the masses during that very stally section that's already been talked about with such a stunning song. It was just a joy to listen to, I have to say. Really entertaining stuff. But yeah, he's really improving as a player. Obviously, as an entertainer, he's already way up there. But yeah, a really solid win in the end for McCarty, who looks to be going very strongly in the season. So, moving on to the third game, and that saw Ellie, the 8-bit Insomniac, and Accrington Stantler taking on the Staraptors, the Seattle Staraptors, and they are coached by, I'm having a terrible mind blank. Who are they coached by? I've forgotten the name entirely. Gearhart! I'm so sorry, Gearhart. I had a massive mind blank there. It was terrible. Right, moving on to this game. The Stantlers versus the Staraptors. We saw a 2-0 victory for Accrington Stantler this time, which really makes the Crystal division very interesting indeed, but we'll get onto that later on in the video. Looking at Gearhart's team building, we saw Assault Vest Tentacruel, which is something I'm personally a massive fan of. I like Assault Vest Tentacruel because it's got massive special defense naturally, meaning he can invest fully in physical bulk, get that sort of not quite as high physical bulk, up to as high as it can go, whack the Assault Vest on, you've still got very nice support options in the form of Rapid Spin and in this case Acid Spray, which was really nice. He did bring a very intriguing Registeel set with Ironhead, Lock-On and Zap Cannon. Interesting combination. He said it was there to kind of deal with the Magic Bounce on Mega Sableye, because one of the things Registeel likes to do is paralyze things, but Magic Bounce is going to put a stop to that straight away. So he was thinking, go for the Lock-On, get the Zap Cannon off, get through Magic Bounce, and ideally maybe Power Flinch Sableye. Now, whilst that is a very nice way of getting a status onto Mega Sableye, which is normally very difficult, not sure if it's optimal because, you know, you're already looking to outspeed it, and it's going to be able to tank an Ironhead and just heal up. So whether it was optimal, I'm not entirely sure, because in the process you could quite easily have got a Will-O-Wisp onto the Registeel, who does not get recovery of its own. Now, Gearhart was also rocking Muscle Band over Life Orb on Victini. I think that's a good decision. Residual is never nice on Victini. It's a huge hitter, especially if you're choiced. In this case, of course, he wasn't. But, you know, it's sort of a hit-and-run kind of thing. You don't want to be taking too much recoil, especially if rocks are up. I thought overall it was a good build from Gearhart. I was worried that he wasn't going to have enough for Regirock. He had nothing that was specifically set aside as a special attacker. So if Ellie was bringing physical Regirock, which I believe she did in the end, he was going to have a bit of a problem with that, I thought. On Ellie's side, you had the super spooky Infinite Swords Dancing set, which is just terrifying. With Mach Punch and of course the poison type attack in the form of Gunk Shot to deal with Clefable on her opponent's side. Now, she was also bringing hazards on Roserade. Personally, I think Spikes might have been a better option. What she was doing was bringing Toxic Spikes to try and find out whether or not the Clefable was Magic Guard or not. Now, it worked out in the end because Gearhart brought Unaware. Personally, I would have thought Spikes would have been a better option, simply for the fact that he does have a Tentacruel. and Spikes would still have shown whether it was Magic Guard or not, based on it being damage. In the end, it worked out. She was able to get up a couple of layers throughout the match and get toxic damage off on mons, which was really nice. She also had a bit of a misgen, not a misgenning, but a mis-item, as it were. Wrong item on Latios. Latias. Always get them mixed up. Latios is the offensive one. It's got an O in it. That's how we remember, gang. So she was supposed to be packing a choice scarf, I believe. In fact, it was leftovers on there, which didn't really set her back too much, I think. Throughout the game, we saw a lot of nice double switches from both sides. Some of them were ballsy. Switching a Clefable into a Scizor is ballsy as hell. Now, it worked out for Gearhart in the end, which was a huge risk to take. As we say, it did work out. He could put pressure onto the Scizor with Clefable with Flamethrower, but the switch-in, risky. Worked out, but risky. The game itself was very close. It came down to some really, really interesting decisions in the end. Infinite was able to get the last sort of clean-up job going on, but it was really lucky that her Life Orb got knocked off, because it meant that she was able to switch into Stealth Rocks, got left on 9 hit points, and then fire off attacks without taking Life Orb recall. Now, if she still had Life Orb, what we would have seen was a matchup at the end of Scarfed Crocodile versus Latias, and that could very well have gone Crocodile's way. But you know, Ellie played a very good game in the end. She used that luck to her advantage, but in the end she was able to get rid of what needed to be gotten rid of, namely the Tentacruel, and indeed the Registeel. Damage on the Registeel was what she needed, getting rid of the Tentacruel to allow her Infinite to do some really nice late game work, and that was exactly what she did, taking the 2-0 victory over the Staraptors to make the Crystal Division, as we said, really, really close and very finely poised.
Yeah, I think this was a very entertaining match to watch. As you said, some very, very nice double switches from both sides. Some very nice plays. A very, I think, highly skilled match. It's one to watch if you want to see some high-quality battlers doing a high-quality battle. As we said in the team building, bringing the lock-on Zap Cannon Registeel to bypass the magic bounce it's fun, it's interesting, but I don't know if it's the optimal thing to do, considering that Registeel would naturally outspeed a Mega Sableye already. If he wants to specifically para-flinch it, then I guess okay, but you're not going to be doing anything to a Mega Sableye with an Iron Head, especially considering you're uninvested in attack, and if it doesn't get paralyzed or flinched on one turn, it goes for recover, and you are back to square one. So I don't know if that's the optimal thing to do in the match, but I mean, props to him, I guess. But during the match, he actually only went for lock-on once. Instead, he just opted just to try his luck and just go for Zap Cannons anyway. Managed to hit 2 out of 3, which is pretty decent. But the paralysis that was caused by it was actually cancelled out, considering Florges had aromatherapy. Yeah, it didn't really matter too much in the end. And another thing as well is that if he's going for lock-on, Ellie just switches out and the effect of lock-on just kind of negates. So, again, don't know if that's the optimal thing to do, but hey-ho, who am I to judge? Except I totally am, but that's not the point. As you said, actually, Infinite's Life Orb being knocked off kind of saved it at the end, especially considering that Latias had the wrong item. If it was Choice Scarfed, then that match, you know, it probably would have gone Latias's way. With that matchup of Scarf Crook versus Scarf Latias, Latias probably would have won it if it, you know, hadn't missed a Draco or something like that. But as it had the wrong item, it had leftovers. If Infinite had gone down, either, you know, due to rocks being a little bit lower, or still having the Life Orb and going down to Life Orb Recall after taking out Megalophony with a Mach Punch, then it would have been Scarf Crook against Leftovers Latias, and considering it's an offensive Latias but with leftovers, then, you know, that may have ended really badly for Ellie. But as it is, that Life Orb was knocked off in Infinite, and she was able to just Mach Punch her way to victory, pretty much. Which was very nice for her indeed. As you said, the AV Tentacruel, it's a really nice addition. I'm a big fan of AV Tentacruel as well. Max physical defense with Assault Vest is a very nice set. And I do agree with you as well that maybe Spikes would have been a little bit better than Toxic Spikes. Tentacruel just gets rhythm with his presence, and he would have been forced to go for a spin if there was a rapid spin if there were Spikes. So in the end, though, I still think this was a very, very fun match. As I said, a very high-quality match for people to watch. Very entertaining, and that means that Ellie gets another win, and the Seattle Staraptors get their first loss in the season, taking them to 2-1. So, with that said, let's move on to the fourth and final match from this week, which is the Washington Blazikens and Mighty Mammothswine taking on the Houston Gastros and M&J TV. Now, Baby Nick, Mighty Mammothswine, and Mike, M&J TV, were both winless going into this match. They were both 0-2. So one of them was going to get their first win, and it turns out it was M&J TV getting his first win. The Houston Gastros picking up a 3-0 victory over the Blazikens here. Now, in terms of a team building standpoint, I think that Mike's team building on this one, M&J TV's, the Houston Gastros for this one, they just had an insane amount of coverage on his team. He brought an offensive view with Expert Belt, which just had 4 attacking moves. Same with Togekiss was Assault Vest with just 4 attacking moves, of course, because it's an Assault Vest, you have to do that. But just 4 attacking moves in that, 4 attacking moves in that. He had some very nice, just general coverage on his entire team, which was very nice to see. Just had all the, all of his options just kind of covered with that. But when we get into the match, there was an unfortunate Scald Burn on Spiritomb, followed immediately by a Willow miss on the Hydreigon for M&J TV. A little bit of unfortunate hacks on his side, but it didn't seem to set him back too much, which was very nice to see. He made some very nice pain split plays with Spiritomb against Baby Nick's Mega Venusaur, and it kind of forced it out. It forced it to just use a load of syntheses as the Spiritomb just kept pain splitting. So the Mega Venusaur was getting HP back, but then so was Spiritomb, and both of them were burned, so it just came to the point where they were both just taking a little bit of burn damage, then getting some HP back, then burn damage, and Mega Venusaur was forced to switch out because he had way more pain splits than he did synthesis. So forcing out the Mega Venusaur with pain split was very nice indeed. Nick brought all of the recovery moves on this one. He brought Roost Hydreigon, Synthesis Mega Venusaur, Recover Gastrodon. He had all of those reliable recovery moves. He brought 3 of them on this team. But I do feel like he maybe could have used them a little bit better, considering that, as we said with the Mega Venusaur, all he was doing was constantly just using Synthesis, but getting nowhere with it because the Spiritomb just kept using Pain Split. And it was the same kind of matchup with Hydreigon using Roost against a Nidoqueen going for Sludge Wave. It was doing, I think, around 45%, so just a tiny little bit less than what Roost was giving him back. And he did manage to get a crit at one point, which set Baby Nick back even more, and it was just kept doing the same thing, just kept doing Roost, Sludge Wave takes him back down, Roost, Sludge Wave takes him back down. So I do feel like he could have used those moves a little bit better, but he didn't really, he was just kept being forced out and just kind of wasting PP on those moves. And there was a very unfortunate play, a Manectric going for a Thunderbolt on the Suicune, getting a paralysis and getting a full power on the same turn, as the Suicune, I believe, would have taken out the Manectric on that turn, which was very unfortunate for M&J TV, but he did manage to combat that with a rest, got rid of that paralysis, which was very nice. There was, again, a very nice play from M&J TV going for a Taunt on his Cobalion, predicting the Synthesis from Mega Venusaur. Did that very well indeed, prevented the Synthesis, very correct prediction, very nice play indeed. The first KO actually was on turn 32, and that was for M&J TV. So you can see this match was a long one. There was, as we said, there was a lot of Roost, Sludge Wave, or Synthesis, Pain Split, all of that just kind of really getting nowhere, but just trying to figure each other out and see and waiting for the other person to make the move, really. But as we get towards the tail end of the match, there was a very nice Grass Knot prediction from M&J TV, predicting the Gastrodon to switch in with his Togekiss, went for Grass Knot, hit the Gastrodon, nearly killed it, and then he just followed up with an Air Slash, took out the Gastrodon, which really swung the momentum in his favour. And then at the very end of the match, there was a very nice Sucker Punch and Shadow Sneak combination from Nidoqueen and Spiritomb to be able to take out the Alakazam. And once again, I think there's a big improvement from M&J TV. Mike is really improving every single week, picking up his first win, bearing in mind he is not the most experienced person in competitive ever, picking up a big win, especially against someone who was close to him in the league, didn't have any wins. It was, I think, a huge win in terms of the league standing and stuff, but I think it was a huge moral victory for him as well. I think his confidence is really going to be boosted in this one, and it was very nice to see Mike playing a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more enjoying the matches instead of being so tense about it. And I think that really showed with how he played very well, made some very nice plays, and he managed to pick up a 3-0 victory, his first win in the GBA.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Gastros team build was very nice. It's always nice to see offensive Mew. Mew is one of those mons that's it's got so much potential, as we all know. Very easy to shoehorn it into a defensive role with like defog and a status and a recovery move. The offensive Mew is always nice to see. As it is, it didn't actually hit the field, which is unfortunate. We didn't get to see it get its sort of enormous coverage off in any way, shape or form. It was nice to see that it was brought. Yeah, you know, the second turn burn onto Spiritomb, it was unfortunate for M&J TV. I also actually think it was unfortunate for Nick, because it would have just, if he could have got a Toxic onto that thing, it would have been so much easier to take down. With the fact that, of course, Will-O-Wisp burn damage doesn't stack as Toxic does, and with such a bulky Mono Spiritomb who can annoy you with Pain Split, as in fact Mike did throughout the game, you know, a Toxic would have been nicer. If he could have got a Toxic onto it, it would have been just easier to deal with. Interesting to see that that Will-O-Miss, that I believe is the 4th Will-O-Miss in 2 games. So it seems like Hardy's lack of luck with Thunder Waves and Paralysis on his Sylveon has kind of passed over to Will-O-Wisp and Mike, which hopefully he'll be able to sort of put aside in the next games. Not, of course, that he can do anything about it, it's just unfortunate. I think he made really good plays with the Spiritomb, as has been said. It's very difficult to get the best out of a low HP, slow, burned Mon. But Mike did it with Spiritomb. He really got the best out of it. He was able to really start whittling away at the Mega Venusaur and kind of force Nick to waste those synthesises. Very difficult word to say. He made him sort of use them up. And whilst, yeah, it was a bit of a waste of PP, but I actually think Nick kind of took an opportunity at the optimal time by switching into a low base HP mon in the form of Manectric that won't have had much investment, with Spiritomb at the optimal amount of HP, meaning that the Pain Split he knew was coming wasn't going to do an inordinate amount of damage to Manectric, and he could try and fire off as powerful a hit as possible to get as much damage. We've mentioned sort of the unfortunate nature of that T-Bolt para / full para onto the Suicune. I guess a Scald might have taken out the Manectric from there and caused a little bit less heartbreak and grief to the Gastros. Yeah, we've mentioned how Nick was bringing all the recovery. I think there was just too few hazards and offensive statuses to be able to effectively stall. If, as I said, he could have got a Toxic onto the Spiritomb, burns around some of the mons that didn't get recovery on the Gastros side, he would have been able to stall out much more effectively. And yeah, it was just unfortunate for him that he had to resort to going for those healing moves kind of at the point in the game where he did. He wasn't able to have got any hazards around, he wasn't able to have got too many statuses on mons, so at that time it wasn't going to work as well as it probably would have if it had been able to get those statuses up earlier. And we've mentioned how Grass Knot Togue on the switch to Gastro, really well played. Mike, as been mentioned, he's playing much better. He really is. He's improving every time, and as Rye has said, really nice to see him relaxing into it. He was really tense last game. It didn't go the way he wanted to, and to come so close would have really sort of dented his confidence. But he's going to be getting that back, playing more relaxed and getting the win. You know, he could have maybe got a better differential at the end, but it would have been risky. And I think for him it would have been too risky. More important for him to get his first win than to try and get like a 4 or 5-0, settle for the 3-0, get the first win, get that confidence. And you know, Nick, he's sitting at 0-3, it's unfortunate, but he's still a good player, and I don't think he'll take it far too much to heart. I think he'll be able to come back from this. You know, it's obviously it's still very early on in the season, there's a fair few weeks to go. He's still got time to get some wins, and he still bought some good mons. You know, last week I was talking about how I thought Alakazam could be a good mon to bring, could put in work, and it certainly got him at least one. I think it might have got him even more than that in the terms of KOs, and you know, it was a good decision to bring that. He made some very good team building choices. I really like bulky Hydreigon. It's something that you really always see in that offensive, sometimes Scarf, sometimes Specs role, getting U-turn initiative. But to bring a bulky one, it's a very good set to bring. It's got surprising bulk, it hits very well with that dragon typing. Yeah, I really like that decision, just unfortunately he wasn't able to make it work on the day, and yeah, the first win of the season to the Gastros.
So, with that said, we are going to take a look at the conference breakdown. Now, for this week, because there was, a bit of miscommunication, a little bit of organization issues, we won't actually be talking about the league leaders this week, but we are hoping to get that to you next week with the updated stats for week 4. We just couldn't really get it in time for this week, but for next week, hopefully, we can get it sorted for you. So, unfortunately, no league leaders today, but we are going to take a look at the conference breakdown. So, we can see if we take a look at the yellow conference division, whatever name it is, we can see that we now have distinct frontrunners in the San Francisco Arcaniners with 3 wins, 0 losses, with a +8 differential, followed by 2 teams on 2 and 1. The New York Shellmets 2 and 1 with their still a +4 differential, which is very, very respectable. Followed by the Buffalo Bills, also 2 and 1 with a 0 differential. So that's the Dolphinians going 5 and 3, giving the Bills a +2 differential instead of +5, putting them on a 0 differential instead of a +3. And then obviously in 4th place you had the Miami Dolphinians, 0 wins, 3 losses, and a -12 differential, which is better than the -15 it probably would have been. So you can see the front runners, San Francisco Arcaniners, but the Shellmets and Bills very, very close behind indeed. So it's still a very, very close race in the yellow division.
Absolutely, and speaking of close races, we move on to the crystal division, and my is it finally poised here. Sitting at the top, we have Gearhart, we got it right this time, Gearhart, and the Seattle Staraptors, 2 wins, 1 loss, differential of +4, but just behind them, taking that win this week, we have Ellie and the Accrington Stantler, also with 2 wins, also with 1 loss, and a differential of +3. It is so close at the top of the Crystal Division. Just a matter of 1 KO is separating those 2 teams. It's going to be fascinating to see how that division plays out. Because, just the fact there's no front runner means it's still close towards the bottom of it as well. Houston Gastros with M&J TV picking up their first win. They move on to 1 and 2 with that +1 differential, which is really going to boost the confidence of him even further. And towards the bottom, we do have Mighty Mammoth Swine and the Washington Blazikens. They're sitting at 0 and 3 with that -8 differential, but it's still early in the league. It's still a good player with a good team. Anything can happen, absolutely anything.
Exactly, and I feel like there's going to be some big matches yet to come. We can see it's so close between most of these teams. Even the Gastros, even though they're 3rd in the table, they're only like 1 game behind. If the Staraptors and/or the Stantlers lose in their next week match and the Gastros win, that puts them at 2 and 2, the same as the other teams. So they're going to be very, very close. And obviously the Gastros are going to have their increased confidence from this week, getting their first win. So who knows what can happen next week. Speaking of next week, we're going to take a look at some of those matches that we cannot wait to see. So the first match you can expect to see next week in week 4 of GBA D-League Season 2 is the San Francisco Arcaniners and Septile MC taking on the Miami Dolphinians and Hardy Tack. So, Shroom, what do you think about this match?
This really is a David and Goliath kind of tale. Arcaniners 3 and 0 +8, Dolphinians 0 and 3 -12. On paper, it looks like a done deal, but you can never write anyone off. The Miami Dolphinians have some really prevalent threats. Weavile puts in a massive shift against the Arcaniners. It hits a lot of his mons super effectively, and to back that up, he has a Rotom Wash that can hit most of the rest of them. So, really, the Miami Dolphinians, they have potential to cause an enormous upset here based on that team matchup. It looks really good, and with some decent offensive support towards those couple of mons that have been mentioned, this could be an upset, dare I say it, I don't really see Butterfree putting in a shift in this game. Gotta say.
That's unfortunate.
I don't see that doing an enormous amount. But the Arcaniners, George, whilst he'll have his work cut out to deal with the mons, and he certainly will, just because of the threats that the Dolphinians have, he's always got tricks up his sleeve. There's a reason he's 3 and 0 at the moment. He is such an intuitive player. He will find a way, I think, of dealing with this team. I actually think this is going to be a fairly close game. On paper, it could look like an absolute whitewash, just based on the scores, but I think this is going to be a close one. I think the Arcaniners will take it, I actually don't think they'll take it comfortably. I think this is going to be a close win for the Arcaniners.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'm inclined to agree with you on that one, but at the same time, I think that at the end of the day, Hardy Attack has threats like you say, like Weavile and Rotom Wash, things like that. They do a huge number on the Arcaniners team. However, I feel like Sceptile MC is going to know that, and he will prep accordingly. And he will bring something like, I don't know, he might bring something like Yachi Berry Landorus Incarnate. Expecting, you know, an Ice Shard. Maybe it might bring a Scarfed one to outspeed Weavile, so that it's forced to go for an Ice Shard. Yeah, Scarfed Yachi Berry, new meta. But he might bring something like that, so it's forced it to go for Ice Shard, but then he might surprise him with that. He might be able to take an Ice move with it, and I just don't know if Hardy is going to be ready for some of the tricks that George is going to have. So I feel like, even with the superior matchup, potentially, I feel like Sceptile MC is still going to be able to take this match, and I feel like it's going to be a 3 or a 4-0, I think, for the Arcaniners. I would guess, anyway.
There it is. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, moving on to the second game, we are going to have Macadi's Bouffalant builds taking on the New York Shellmets and Super Gassy. This is the mid-table scrap from the Yellow Division, with both teams on 2-1. So this is going to be a fantastic game. Who do we have in this one?
Oh, this is so tough to call. Like you said, this is going to be an extremely close match as both teams are on 2-1 in the same division. There's only a differential of 4 separating them. So literally a win by 2 for the Bouffalant Bills. If they win 2-0 in this one, they're going to have the same differential, obviously with a slightly different record, but they're still going to have the same differential after this match. So a close result is still going to have them both really, really close, even though one will be slightly in front of the other in terms of wins and losses. So even a win for one of these teams here, it may put them in front for now, but it's still going to be close. As we said, these divisions are so close right now. So in terms of the actual match, though, I feel like the Bouffalant Bills, I feel like they're going to be able to try. I feel like they're going to be able to take down the Shellmets in this one, and I'll try and explain why. In that the New York Shellmets, they've been playing very well so far, but they did lose to the Arcaniners this week. And the Bouffalant Bills, their one loss has come from the Arcaniners as well. So they're both very evenly matched, but I do feel like Macadi's team building and the way he's been playing is just that tiny little bit better than the New York Shellmets. And we could potentially see rain coming for the Shellmets this time to potentially try and counter the sand that the Bouffalant Bills may actually bring this time. It'll be the first time that the sand has been brought, so it may potentially be a little bit of a weather war, which would be great to see. But I do think if it is a weather war, I do feel like the Bouffalant Bills will come out on top, because I feel like the automatic sand that the Bouffalant Bills can bring in terms of sand stream and Powdon is going to be the manual rain that the Shellmets can bring, just from easiness of getting it set up, just in terms of that perspective. It's a tough one to call, but I do feel like Macadi has just been playing just a little bit better than Super Gassy this season so far. Again, this is going to be a close game. I do not think this is going to be, you know, a blowout by any means, but I do feel like the Bills will take it, and I think that 2-0 call that I made earlier, I think that's actually what it might be. I think it might be a 2-0 victory for the Bouffalant Bills.
Very interesting indeed. I have to agree that a weather war would be really something to see. The Shellmets certainly have the team to take advantage of the rain, but very interestingly, they have a few members of their team who don't mind the sand. Garchomp doesn't mind it, Reuniclus has Magic God, Deblade isn't getting hit by it, Amoonguss with that nice natural recovery is looking good as well. So he could be able to turn the sand against its bringer. Possibly. He'd have to play well to do it, because obviously, as you said, Hippowdon has the advantage there of having the auto summoning. But I think Rain versus Sand here could make this a really, really interesting game. Now, looking at the builds, Macadi has been reliant, and rightly so, and very successfully so, on that core of Umbreon and Dusclops. But the New York Shellmets have a Mon. They have one of those Mons that can potentially deal with both of them. With enough prior damage on either of them, the Blades could be putting in a really nice shift here, because those two are not the only ones that hit super effectively. A lot of the bulky ones it can do the same things to. Slowbro it can hit for massive damage. Crobat it's not taking a lot in return. Granbull, even with the Intimidate, you know, it's got the Steel Stab that can hit it very hard with. So the Blade could be a really big player in this game. And if the rain is brought, it's going to be very, very tough indeed. But I think if it does happen, just the fact of that auto-summoning for Hippowdon, you can get rid of any potential rain setters. He's going to have a much easier time. That is Makadi I'm talking about, of course. And I think Makadi could be taking this one as well. But I'm not confident. I think this could be a 1-0 either way, whoever takes it. I'm going to have to plump for the Bills just this once, but I'm not confident in that call. I'm really not.
Yeah, it's going to be a great match either way.
It really is.
Moving on to the third match from next week, we have the Accrington Stantler, coached by the 8-bit Insomniac, taking on the Houston Gastros, coached by M&J TV. Now this is, again, a very close game for the Crystal Division. Both teams picking up a win in last week, both with a little bit of confidence moving into the next week. Who do you think's got this match, Shroom?
This is another one that's very finely poised, much like the one we've just talked about. And as you mentioned that if the Gastros take a win in their next game, depending on who they play, they could be moving up the table. Now they take on the Stantlers, the differential is 2. If the Gastros win this game, they go second on differential and I guess alphabetical order, which I suppose is how it would be brought down to in that kind of respect. Because yeah, just a 1-0 would give Gastros the same differential as the Stantlers. This is going to be a really, really close game. You know, as we say on paper, just by how they are in the table, the Stantlers would seem to have it. But it's not going to be that simple. We all know that. The Houston Gastros have got some really, really good mons on their team. You can never prepare for Mew, but and various other ones on the Gastros roster as well. But as we said, you know, the Stantlers have got some decent mons of their own that you have to really prepare for a number of sets for. Infinite, very versatile. Latias can do a lot of things. A lot of bulk in the form of Florges, Vaporeon. Sizzle is always a threat, and looking at the Gastros team, it can put in a decent amount of work. I think we could see a big performance from the likes of Mega Aerodactyl here. As long as the big physical walls on the Stantlers side get taken care of, you know, the likes of Regirock, Mega Sableye, damage on that would be very nice. Mega Aerodactyl could put in a decent shift. Darmanitan as well, but of course, Ellie does have answers to that Darmanitan. So it'll be a case for the Gastros of really wearing down those walls as a matter of course. I think we could see a lot of statuses going on here. I think that would really help out the Gastros cause. Can Mike take care of Ellie's team? It's going to be very tough. It's such a difficult one to call, but I think the confidence boost from the Gastros, he will feel on top of the world after that. And to take 1 win and 2 losses and still be at a positive differential, he will be really confident. And much as I want to say that the Stantlers have the matchup, I think it could be turned around in this one. I really do. I think the Gastros could take this. And I don't think it will be a convincing win in terms of scoreline. But I think the Gastros are going to do it. And I think I'm going to go with a 2-0 victory to them.
Wow. See, I thought I was going to be edgy and say that the Gastros are going to win. Damn, you stole my answer, Shroom.
Well, I try.
Yeah. So, like you said, this is going to be a really, really close game. And this is huge in terms of the Crystal Division. Like you said, a 1-0 victory has them on the same differential and same, you know, wins and losses. Same, what's the word? How can I forget that now?
KD?
Yeah, like KD, wins and losses. Whatever it is. Things and stuff. English. So just a 1-0 victory, but if the Gastros get anything more than that, they're going to be distancing themselves from the Stantlers in terms of, you know, in terms of differential, which is going to be really interesting to see. And not only that, but if the Staraptors lose against the Blazikens next week, which is the match we're going to come on to next, if they actually lose, the Gastros could actually go to the top of the Crystal Division, which would be quite the comeback from having, you know, 2 losses in the first 2 weeks to coming back to being top of the Crystal Division after week 4 would be quite something indeed. But it's going to be very tough to call this one. This just goes to show how close the race is in the Crystal Division. But Like you said, the team matchup is very, very intriguing. There's definitely some threats on both sides that they kind of have answers to, but they're going to have to be prepared for adequately. If one thing on either side is overlooked, I feel like it's going to be taken advantage of very well indeed. And as we've been saying, Mike's been improving every week so far. And the fact that he's now identifying things that he can exploit, and he's finding ways to use his mons effectively and use them in the proper way, using them against Ellie. If he can spot what, something that he can exploit, I feel like he will do it. The same with Ellie though, that we cannot count Ellie out at all. She's a fantastic battler, and her prep has been pretty solid so far, aside from, I think, week 1. Her second week and week 3 prep has been very, very solid. I think she's only on the up from now. So it's kind of a clash of people who are both on the rise to see who can rise a little bit quicker. And I feel like like I said before, I actually think the Gastros might take this. As we said, he's shown vast improvement every week, and I don't see why that isn't going to continue. With the teams that he's been building so far, very solid team building prep, and he can only improve from here, I think. And like you said, it's going to be a close game, not going to be a big win, but I think the Gastros are going to take it 1-2-0 maybe. We'll see, but it's going to be a close game, and I'm really looking forward to watching it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, moving on to the final game of Week 4. In the Crystal Division, we are going to see the Washington Blazikens and Mighty Mammothswine taking on Gearhart's Seattle Staraptors. So, what do we think of the final game?
Now, this one's really interesting because, again, this is the top of the division facing the bottom of the division. And that's also happened with the Arcaniners versus Dolphinians that we mentioned before, but this is nowhere near as polarizing as it was before. Arcaniners are 3-0, Dolphinians 0-3. But in this one, the Staraptors are 2-1, the Blazikens are still 0-3. But that does not mean that Baby Nick is by any means out of this match. The 2 wins that the Staraptors have are against the Miami Dolphinians and the Houston Gastros, 2 teams that are, lower in power rankings, lower on the standings. So there's no need for us to count out Baby Nick right now. Just because he's 0-3 does not mean he's a bad battler or anything like that. And I feel like considering that the Seattle Staraptors have just lost, their confidence may be a little bit down, maybe a little bit tarnished, breaking their win streak from the start of the season. And Baby Nick, I think he is going to be seriously hungry to come out for a win. Taking the loss against the Houston Gastros this week, I feel like he's going to come out really, really hungry for a win next week to try and get his first win and try and start clawing his way back in the Crystal Division to try and make it to the playoffs. So I think, again, bearing in mind that the team prep from the Staraptors has been pretty solid so far. Blazikens maybe could be a little bit better, but of course you always learn from your mistakes, so I feel like he's only going to improve as well. So I feel like in this week, I think the Blazikens are actually going to take it. And reason being for that one is, as I said, I think they're both going to improve, but I feel like the Blazikens are just going to improve that a little bit more. The Staraptors were kind of on the rise with the 2 wins. Having that 1 loss has kind of knocked them back. But Baby Nick and the Washington Blazikens have had 3 losses. They haven't risen yet. They're still waiting to rise. And I feel like the Week 4 match is the time they will. I think they're going to come out against the Staraptors and they will actually win. Again, I don't think any of these matches is going to be a big win. But I feel like it's going to be 2 or 3-0 victory to the Blazikens.
Very interesting. I think this is going to be a game of wall breakers, because I think both teams have massive offensive powerhouses going on. On the one side, the Staraptors, you've got the likes of Victini and Megalopony and even Salamence, and between them, Crocodile. I forgot even to mention Crocodile. They are massively powerful mons. Never easy to build against those kind of things, but on the other side, you've got the likes of Mammothswine, Hydreigon, Lucario, Entei, and I'm even going to pick Mega Venusaur to go offensive this week. But the one I really want to pick up on is Lucario, The Staraptors have been able to lean on the walling core of Clefable and Registeel. Lucario can break that core, and with support from the likes of Mega Venusaur and Mammothswine, and with Hydreigon to clean up some of the slower mons on the Staraptors team, the Blazikens, I think, could spring it here. I think Lucario is going to be a big player. He's who I'm pipping, and on the other side it's going to be Victini. I think it really could come down to those two mons and who can take out the most on the opposite sides, because Victini is ridiculously powerful. It can hit through resistances, it can hit through move weakening abilities. Lucario has the option to set up on either side and take out those two big wars on the Staraptors team. So I think it's going to come down to those two, and maybe even who can bring the sort of least expected offensive threat. Which is why I think we could see something offensive that usually goes a bit bulkier, along the lines of maybe Mega Venusaur on the Blaziken side, for example. We could see even something like the likes of Yanmega coming through. It could be very interesting to see what the Staraptors and Gearhart bring to the table. Who do I think is going to win? It's difficult, because it's again one of those ones that I kind of want to go against the on-paper result. I kind of want to agree with you and say that the Blazikens can pick up their first win here. I think they have the mons to do it, if he plays them right. You know, it might be said that he could have played a bit better, certainly in the last game. I think if he picks his game up and really brings his A game, he can do this. And I'm going to pip the Blazikens to take maybe a 2-0 victory in this one. But it's not going to be easy. Gearhart is an on-form player, you know. He may have lost his last game, I think, which he did, yeah. He may have lost his last game, but it's not going to set him back too much. He will be looking to get himself back on track. As you said, Baby Nick, he's going to be hungry for a win, and I think it's a win he's going to get here, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, whatever happens, we have 4 fantastic matches next week, all with pretty big implications, and ones that we, just from an analyst perspective, cannot wait to watch. And just as a fan perspective, can't wait to watch either. Just going to be great matches to watch all around. So with that said, that is going to conclude everything from this week for the GBA D-League Season 2 Week 3 weekly recap. Join us next week for week number 4, when we're going to go over those matches that we have just mentioned. We'll be going over them and analysing all of those boys. But stay tuned on the GBA channel, as we have a lot more content coming up this week. We have all the usual suspects, all the usual videos, as you can expect from the GBA channel as of late. And we shall see you guys next week. So I've been RhyQuinn, he's been Shroom, and we shall see you next week. You've been awesome. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.